Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Welcome back to the Koala Podcast. And Peter Homberg from Dentons Berlin is back again. And there's good reason for him being on the show this week. And that's because the Bundestag actually did something. I'm not 100% sure what it did. I've read lots of pieces, lots of articles. But if we need to ask anybody what's happened, Peter is going to be the best source for the reality of what things are on the ground in Germany as of this week. So what happened last week, Peter?
Yeah, Sean, thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon, your time.
Yep.
What actually happened is that the Bundestag, the parliament, has passed a new law legalizing recreational cannabis in Germany to a certain extent. And I have to say that very clearly. Why did I say that? Back in October 2022, the German government implemented its original plan, or wanted to implement its original plan to legalize cannabis to the full extent, as you have seen that in Canada, with cultivation controlled by the government in Germany for the German market. And of course, then distribution of the recreational cannabis through licensed dispensaries, also under the control of the government. That was the original plan, very much like we have seen that in Canada. Well, what they did actually at that point in time, they presented that plan to the European Commission, and there was no formal process for that, but the Commission actually very clearly said, if you're going to do that, you are going to violate the Schengen Agreement as well as from our point of view, the UN Conventions 1961, 1978, and 88. And as such, the German government then changed its plan with a new two-pillar model for the legalization of recreational cannabis. And the first pillar, and I explain what the first pillar is about, was in the parliament in last Friday and was actually passed with the legalization of cannabis for recreational purposes. So the details here are that each and every adult, hopefully from April 1st onwards this year, is allowed.
That's a well-selected date, I have to say. I did know.
Yeah.
April the 1st.
Yeah. Well.
Yes, well, exactly. I think we can move on.
That's true,
it
yeah.
says a few things.
Indeed. Actually, the respective one adult in a household can actually cultivate up to 3 female plants for its own use, which means he could use the flowers from those plants for personal consumption. He cannot even give it to friends. He cannot pass it to anybody. But for his personal consumption, he can actually cultivate 3 plants in his household.
Are there rules as to where those plants can be cultivated? So can you cultivate them on the balcony of your apartment or in your bedroom?
Good question. It must be secured that no other third party, not of course children, can reach out to those plants. The balcony question really hasn't been decided yet. It could be possible. On the other hand, if it's disturbing all the other neighbors, because there's a certain smell, as we all know, that might be can be stopped by the landlord, for example. So it's actually
essentially it's saying in this case, and we've got to move on a whole lot of other things. So I'll be really quick. Personal growing 3 female plants yourself, unless you live in the country in a nice big house with a garden, with a greenhouse down at the end of the garden. But I mean, most people are going to be urban based. It's sort of, is it trying to cut out a lot of people, or is it just that's the quickest thing they could think of?
No, it's the quickest thing they could think of for legalizing cannabis, as they actually promised in the coalition agreement. And as the European Commission put a hold on the original plan, the German government was thinking about what can we do, and they just said, okay, let's do this legalization of the homegrow, as we call it.
Essentially, it's going to be left in the hands of the police with very wide-ranging guidelines as to what decisions they make on the specific cases, isn't it? Because
That's correct, yes.
I mean, look, they have a similar sort of setup in Canberra in the ACT in Australia. And of course, immediately as soon, I think they were allowed more plants, but of course, immediately as soon as people started growing, they grew huge plants or 10 times more than they should, etc., etc. So the government, I presume, is hoping that people are going to be fairly compliant because they've allowed them to do something they didn't let them do before.
Yeah, that's true. And on the other hand, there is a clear provision that you can have only 50 grams of cannabis in your possession at home. So that's the limitation here. So you cannot store hundreds of grams of cannabis flowers at your home. There is a limitation to 50 grams per adult, which can be stored at home, and 25 grams can be carried out in public. So if you're carrying up to 25 grams of flowers, that is legal in Germany from April 1st onwards.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the first part of it. What's the next part of it?
The second part is the cultivation associations, as I call them. So it's allowed that kind of, you would say clubs, I would call it cannabis cultivation associations, are allowed to grow together with its members. And one cultivation association can have up to 500 members together, which means they have to have kind of a premises where they will be allowed to cultivate, but the members themselves have to do that. So you cannot outsource it to any other party who could actually do the cultivation for the cultivation associations. They have to do that on their own. They can use the help of so-called mini jobbers, which can assist them in certain administrative actions, but the growing itself has to be performed by the members. It is yet not very clear what are the preconditions for those clubs to get a respective cultivation license, because that is left to the federal states. The new cannabis law provides only for a framework how this should be structured, and leaves it to the respective federal states in Germany to do the detailed rules and regulations and how and when and under which circumstances such a cultivation associations would receive a license to cultivate.
And those federal states, do they decide that just by writing rules per a committee, or do they follow a sort of US or UK approach where they have committees with public submissions to decide how to create those rules and regulations?
No, they do that on their own. The administration is free to really set up the respective rules, which they have to do once the law will come into force. And we will talk about the date of 1st of April, I think, in a minute again. The cultivation associations could start on July 1st. So there's a time gap of 3 months in between, which would allow now the administration to set up the respective rules and regulations. Today, we have already some of so-called Vereine, which are kind of associations who have already been formed, established, but I cannot even tell them to which authority in which states they could actually file their application to cultivate. And probably, as you know, Germans are very precise. There should be a form for that, and there should be a clear
of course.
distinction.
Australians like to pretend they're different, but they love a form as well. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. So that is all to be done right now, and of course the time is tight. And the question is, do some of the federal states combine their efforts in order to harmonize those rules and regulations? Because theoretically, it's possible that different federal states in Germany have different rules and regulations for the establishment and the activities at a cultivation association. So this has to be seen how it is going to be done.
Okay, and so these cultivation associations, does it say anything in the legislation beyond them having a maximum of 500 members? They can grow X amount of plants. How do they share the results of those grows out amongst the members? And can they is it that because the word is cannabis club that everybody else has been using in the media, so you immediately think of Spain, where there's actually physical places for people to consume as well? Have any of those questions been addressed at all?
Yeah, some of the questions have been addressed. There is no consumption allowed in those clubs, so it's totally different from what we have seen in Spain, for example.
Okay,
that's number one. Number two is it's a non-profit organization. So, of course, the Verein, the association, can actually purchase materials, equipment, and all what they need for the cultivation. But it is a non-profit organization. That means they cannot sell it at a profit to their members. So what's going to happen here is that members who are older than 21 years old can actually get 50 grams per month from the cultivation association. Those members which are between 18 years old and 21 years old can get 30 grams only per month, and with a limited THC content. Those younger members only get flowers which a maximum THC content of 10%. That is already stipulated in this detail in the draft law.
okay, I mean, so that's interesting. I mean, 10%, anybody who knows the cannabis market knows that anybody under the age of 20 is consuming something normally in the 25 to 30% range, and they only have to make one phone call on Telegram to have it delivered to their apartment in about 10 minutes. Do you think those sorts of stipulations are useful in the legislation when you have the reality of what the market actually is?
Well, that's a difficult question. You're asking me for my opinion about.
Yeah, well, I know, and you are a lawyer, so I won't force it out of you, Peter. I won't force it out of you. But I mean, the same issues have come up in the States, and they're backtracking. Florida's a perfect example, and they're trying to drop THC levels down to 10 or even lower. And actually, that I've noticed in the last couple of days, there's been a couple of whispers out of their legislature that even the Republicans realize trying to do that is a pointless exercise, because all you're doing is sending them back to the black market again.
Is it market correct? Yes. And let me put it in those words. The practicability of that law and whether the respective targets which the government has set, which means attacking the illicit market, protecting the youth, and increasing the quality for the consumer, whether they can be reached with that legislation, I would say it's questionable.
Okay.
We'll see how it works out, but I fully agree with you. The reality looks totally different, and whether this is now channeling this into that direction, as I just described, with regard to, for example, the THC content of flowers for younger members, is also questionable.
And I mean, it seems also that the legislation implies that you spend a lot of money to grow nice home-grown cannabis, fair enough, that you want, but there seem to be stipulations like obviously it needs to be tested for THC levels, and I presume a number of other things. It seems to me as though the cost of what it'll cost these members to grow their cannabis is going to be nigh on double just purchasing it on the market. Goes back to that other question. So I suppose my question was, has there been any discussion of allowing these groups of individuals in their cultivation organizations to start talking about, in order to cover costs and not send them back to the black market, whether there's any discussion of some of that supply, rather than importing it from Canada, could be medical supply for the local German market?
The answer is clearly no.
Okay.
we do not even know yet the quality requirements of that cannabis which will be cultivated in these cultivation associations.
Okay.
There will be a certain quality measurement that is already stipulated in the law. What kind of quality measurements, what kind of quality has to be produced in order to qualify to be handed over to the respective members is questionable. Whether it's GACP, I don't believe it will be GMP, or any other quality stipulations is not yet clear.
In terms of what happened in the Bundestag last week, do you feel as though there's a long way to go? And what is the next bit of horse trading to create a legislative environment that reflects more, say, a Canadian environment?
John, let me go back to one issue which I think is important for the whole market. This new legislation also stipulates that cannabis and cannabis-related products and THC products will be taken out of the German Narcotics Act. And they will be now put in the new Cannabis Act, which for the medical market is very important, because now the product is not longer a narcotic. So physicians do not have to prescribe a narcotic for the treatment of certain diseases, but can now prescribe a regular RX product for their patients. And that is, from our point of view and from the point of view of our clients active in that field, a big advantage. We will probably see an increase in prescriptions because physicians are not longer asked to really take even a different prescription format in order to give it out to the patient. That is not only a psychological barrier, it's also an administrative barrier, because physicians who actually wanted to prescribe a narcotic have to be separately registered with the BfArM, which is the German FDA, which is a requirement which is not longer necessary if we are talking about a regular RX product. So that's definitely a positive impact of that legislation to the medical market.
Well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
And with respect to the recreational market, I think we will see very, very different issues which will appear here. But what you correctly asked is, what is the next step here? The next step is the second pillar of the German government plan, which is the implementation of scientifically controlled pilot projects. Very much like we have seen that in Switzerland, where under government control, certain licensed dispensaries are giving out to various consumers cannabis. They can actually buy it there, but it will not be rolled out all over Germany. This will not be, as I would call it, a cold legalization. We will see that in larger cities, in various areas, where actually consumers can register and actually purchase cannabis for their personal consumption, of course, being adults. And this will be under scientific control. The government would like to gain data. They would like to see what is the impact of the use of recreational cannabis, not only on the consumer, but also on society, even on traffic accidents. So what is the impact here?
Look, that's the huge issue in the US at the moment. Traffic. I mean, the last 4 months, that's taken up a good 25% of the conversations and the media space that I see. It's a huge issue. So, it does need to be tested properly. Because one of the issues, of course, is they're not even sure whether they've got testing technology that really can work out. So the technology, for once, is behind the reality of the market.
Yeah, and even our Ministry of Traffic right now is still struggling. What is the right measurement? What is the threshold? How much? Actually,
they're not the only ones struggling. I think it's the best thing to tell them. I think basically,
right? Yeah,
everybody else.
Of course, testing methods is also an issue. How can you test it on the spot? Is that possible, like you do that with alcohol, for example? Is there equipment on the market which can be then used by the police if necessary? So that's all. These questions are all unsolved. But the second pillar, we haven't seen even yet a respective draft. The second pillar is actually, as I said, targeting on gaining data. And then, of course, the long-term goal of the German government is to really lobby the legalization of recreational cannabis to the European Commission.
That was my next question: is when do they start in Brussels, and how do they? I mean, the French are immovable on this. The Italians will go either way, depending on who controls it. We don't need to go any deeper into that, but I mean, the French, just like the British, seem absolutely immovable on this. So it's a long fight ahead in Brussels, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can only support this fight with, as I said, a positive collection of data with evidence saying what is the real impact, is there an impact, and what is the impact on the legalization of recreational cannabis. And of course, we will see that also from the first pillar. What's going to happen, as you correctly said, how is the market then structured? Is really the illicit market attacked by these measurements or not? So that is a very interesting question, and it has to be proven how this.
Well, I mean,
will
I
work
think
out.
in the US and Canada, they found out if you create a problem over 100 years, expect a minimum of a decade or more to even start making inroads into this. So I think people are fairly naive. They think that on Tuesday they sort of legalize cannabis, but don't really. And on Wednesday, apparently the black market is meant to disappear. But of course, the reality of that is anybody. I mean, look, anybody under from age of 80 underwards who's smoked marijuana at some point in their life will know how entrenched that part is in the economy, and it's the same across all illegal drugs. So I think this fantasy that we can to move things into a regulated economy very quickly with sometimes legislation with holes in it, it really has to be impressed upon politicians that they have to think a little bit harder.
And probably not with this first pillar, from my point of view.
No, I agree totally.
The legalization, as it has been done in Canada, had an impact on the illicit market. Not, of course, to the extent as expected, but there is a decreasing demand on the illicit market for various reasons. And if you can actually buy it in a licensed dispensary around the corner, I think that's definitely better than go to the illicit dealer for illicit products. But the question is also then, and that's what I always said, it's quality and availability. If I have to drive 10 kilometers to a licensed dispensary, but I can actually order it from, as you correctly said, via any platform to be delivered to my home, but from an illicit dealer, then of course, what do I choose?
Well, 9 times, there's the odd good person, but 9 times out of 10. And also, if we think about it in 21st century terms, of course, it's worse if you get in your car and pump diesel into the air for 10 Ks each way. So you could be arguing you're even doing the planet a favor. Look, Peter, I mean, look, this is all fascinating because we both know the reality that these things happen in jumps and starts. Some aspects of the media get very, very excited. Do you see that what the Bundestag has now done last week will affect the conversation, say, in the Czech Republic that they're having at the moment, and maybe other jurisdictions close by that, again, it's a bit like the US experience. Colorado saw the sky didn't fall in, and, wasn't long before 5 or other states close by realized, it would behove them well to be part of that economy, however imperfect it may be to start with. So, I mean, do you feel that some of the smaller states in the EU will be looking for these sorts of solutions like Malta already has, that basically starts creating an informal coalition in Brussels to move the immovable bigger ones?
Yeah, I think the legislation which has passed last Friday in the Bundestag, or which was passed last Friday in the Bundestag, is a significant step forward. If you look into the environment in Europe, there is the first larger EU member state legalizing cannabis for recreational purposes, of course, to a limited extent. So we should not get overexcited about that.
Exactly.
But it is a step forward. This is, I think, very, very clear. And of course, other countries, other EU member states, are looking at that very carefully. They have their own plans, as you correctly said. Czech Republic is looking at it. They are very much in favor of what the Germans did. They may even, in the Czech Republic, go another route. We don't know that. They may even go for the full legalization, as I described it before, and just wait whether the European Commission is going to sue them before the European Court of Justice for the breach of the Schengen Agreement or not. So at least this has been mentioned by them, by the government in the Czech Republic. Yes, you're right. I believe that countries, EU member states who are looking positively into the legalization of recreational cannabis will form maybe even an informal, but a real coalition to lobby that move at the European Commission level. And that will be interesting to see. However, I think we need first the implementation of that first pillar, and then we'll see how this all works out. But I agree with you that there are EU member states, there are countries in Europe who very positively look at what has happened in Germany so far and may follow or even go a step further.
Well, that would be fantastic news, because my big dream, of course, as you mentioned at the very, very beginning of this conversation, were those UN conventions, and some of the policymakers and individuals within that organization who are preserving their budgets and their jobs for as long as possible. And I feel that nobody's really challenged them. So it would be nice to see a coalition in Brussels that could start maybe lobbying them to have a more sensible conversation about rules that were in effect set by the US 70 years ago. So
very true. Yeah, very true. And I think this can be expected, not on a short-term basis, but in the long term, definitely.
It's a long-term rolling battle. Well, look, it's a campaign. Peter, thank you very much for updating us on the latest part of the campaign, where Germany's actually sort of put a big foot forward, as big as you can, I think, in the world of cannabis. Let's hope there aren't any steps backwards. Peter Homberg, Dentons, cannabis lead for Europe. Thank you very much for being on the Koala Podcast.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Coming how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.